Hey guys, welcome to the Walking Together podcast. This is our first episode back, first episode of the new year. I'm here with Kyle.
Woo!
And Jordan.
You.
Hey.
Hey.
So I had a thought, it's the new year. It is January the 3rd today, when we're recording this. So it's 3 days into the new year. Anybody made any resolutions?
Nah. I quit doing those.
Have you thought, okay, well, Jordan, why'd you quit?
Because I think that there's one resolution that would fix ever having to make a resolution every year. So as if there's like a daily mindset that just eliminates the need to make a New Year's resolution.
What is that?
Focusing on God and allowing yourself to be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Which is
Comes out of Romans.
just happens to be
Romans 12.
what you preached on Sunday.
Yeah.
And if you haven't guessed it by now, part of this is just coming off of what Jordan and I preached on Sunday. And but you saying that like it's kind of one thing reminded me of the scripture you referenced where Jesus asked what are two greatest commandments like.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you'll speak on that, it ties right into why you only really need one resolution instead of...
Yeah. So Jesus was questioned by the Pharisees which commandment is the most important, and he said, well, there's two: love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And he said all the law of the prophets and everything hangs on these two commandments. So if you obey those two commandments, then you will automatically obey everything that God desires and wants from us.
Right.
So it instead of being overwhelmed by a multitude of quote unquote laws and requirements, you just have to focus on two things, and you don't have to worry about all the nitpicky details.
So it sounds like you're saying if you'll just make God your resolution, like getting centered up with God, then the outflow of that will be what you need to change or redirect.
Yeah,
you won't have to work so hard at figuring out what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, so like I think probably the last New Year's resolution I ever made, like I consciously made, was I wanted to clean up my speech, like the words that I chose to use. Like I use
no more wordy dirds.
When I was younger, dude, I used a ton of profanity, and I got convicted of it, and so that was like a resolution that I made for myself. But then I quickly realized, like what I had to start thinking about is like, why am I doing that? Like, what's the whole purpose? Like, am I just doing it for me? Am I doing it for others? And I realized that I'm doing it for God, and really, like, that's the only reason that's the only thing that's going to keep me and should keep anybody from being consistent with anything. Like if you make a commitment, an oath to God, that's there forever. Like God never changes. God, you can make a commitment to a person, but then as soon as you don't care so much about that person anymore, like what's the point of keeping that commitment or whatever?
Right.
And so just committing to God, to me has a lot more weight than anything else. It's a lot more serious. And yeah, so for me, committing to God's heart and it being, the biblical description of picking up your cross daily and following Him and allowing, God's thoughts to be your thoughts, that would automatically transform you into whatever New Year's resolution that you would make for yourself.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about, what kind of person I want to be because the world expects me to act this way or look this way or do this certain thing. We should just be worried about what God wants from us.
So was there I guess, do you remember at what point you came to like realizing that principle or that making resolutions don't seem to work?
I don't know. Not really. I just, I guess I'm pretty simple minded, and so I just try not to make things too complicated than they need to be. And through reading scripture, I mean, yeah, I guess so. Like just through studying and reading the Bible, and what the gospel actually is and what it means, and how Jesus explained what God expects from us. When he was asked what's the greatest commandment, like Jesus made it very simple. And if Jesus made it simple, then why should I make it complicated? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I guess I can't put a finger on like when that happened, but it was just over just reading the Bible, and it's like, wow, this is actually really, really simple, and it's not complicated at all.
Yeah.
So would either of you, Kyle or Jordan, say, and so asking this question to preface the question, New Year's Eve, we were home, my wife and kids, and Christy got a big poster board and wrote 2023 on one side, 2024 on the other side, and we started writing down things we did in 2023, or things we wanted to remember, or things that were good, or things we accomplished, whatever. Then she flipped it over to 2024. And, you wrote down kind of something you wanted to do this year you didn't do last year. And I don't know what gave her the idea to do it, but it just made me think, well, is there a difference in resolutions and for 2024 based on your reflection of 2023 and you got any goals for 2024?
Like, is there a difference between a resolution and a goal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
And to me, it all goes back to your heart posture.
Right.
But I was just curious, do either one of y'all have any, or have you thought about, something you want to do this year that maybe you didn't do last year?
I'll have to think on that one. Because, I mean, I've not really thought of it like that before, but...
Yeah, and I didn't either until, Chrissy kind of did the poster board thing, and I thought it was cool. And if you're listening, for the listeners out there, drop your, if you got comments on this, if got goals or...
Yeah, it sounds like resolution and a goal can be synonymous. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So the definition of resolution could be a firm decision to do something, a course of action determined or decided on. So firm determination. That sounds like a goal.
Yeah. I know the beginning of the year is a really good time to do that stuff, but I wish we wouldn't hold everything right at the new year.
Well, just like we say at Christmas, like, don't let this one day or 1 week be a time just to celebrate Jesus.
Right. Because I think making goals, and I think people equate resolutions so much so with the beginning of a new year that they don't, come February, it doesn't matter anymore. But, if you were to set goals throughout the year, because really I see that, especially whenever it's, whenever it deals with your spiritual maturity, right? If it's about reading the Bible all the way through in a year, whether it be, or just reading something, reading the Bible, a verse, a chapter, a paragraph, or whatever, some consistency in that. Maybe that's your resolution. I don't think that's something that you should beat yourself up about if you miss a day, or if you end up, it takes you 13 months to get through the 12-month reading plan kind of deal.
Right, but the good thing about, first thing, you got to get your heart right.
Right.
And you got to offer it up to God and even ask him, like, is there anything in here that needs to be cleaned out? And him revealing that to you will kind of direct you on how to. It's not a bad thing to have a plan, because if you don't know where you're going or why you're going, then it's probably going. For me, it takes me a lot longer to get there to realize I even need to go.
Right.
So making a goal isn't a bad thing, or having a plan, or saying, I want to read through the Bible in a year, or I want to put down a habit or pick up a habit.
Right. Because I think that's all on the process of sanctification. You're not sanctified after one decision, right? It's the carrying it out every day for here to eternity.
Well, the other benefit is when you express those things and you're bold enough to. A lot of people don't like. I don't like to think about it often or even say it, is because I know that when I say my goal is to run a marathon, and I keep telling people that, and eventually somebody's going to ask me, "Hey, you been running?"
Right.
Or your goal is to go on a mission trip, or your goal is to whatever. The great thing about making yourself vulnerable and putting yourself out there is it allows people to check on you and hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And, historically we don't like that, but you need it. And so even if I don't really want to do it, I'll still take a few minutes to ask myself and think about, well, what's something I want to do this year that maybe I didn't do last year that I said I was going to do, or
Right.
what's something that is going to be beneficial for me and my family, or for this ministry, or for the areas I get to lead in. It's going to be beneficial to let other people know this is where we're going, and I need you to help me get there.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Nick, you talked about on Sunday as well, and you spoke on Psalm 51, right?
Yep.
Psalm 51, where it's just after David got confronted by Nathan the prophet, after David got jiggy with Bathsheba. I almost said Jezebel. I need to get it right. That Jezebel, Bathsheba. But it seems like at one point David didn't even realize that he did anything wrong. Like he had been going down a path of doing a bunch of really like kind of gnarly things. Mm-hmm. Like he manipulated a situation to kill his best friend. That's pretty gnarly,
rough.
dude.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You don't just, like what you said on Sunday, you don't just wake up in the morning and be like, I'm going to kill my best friend. Like,
right.
Like it was a process of a lot of things that happen. But so eventually, this guy Nathan came up and spoke to him, and David had to humble himself to be able to hear what Nathan was saying and recognize that, oh shoot, like I've been wrong for a long time, and I've got to do something about it. And I think that's part of the Walking Together podcast, of being able to have people to be able to say something to you and you be able to be humble about it instead of being arrogant. And Nathan could have come up and said, hey, you've done all these things, and be like, you know what, I'm the king, I do what I want, and it would just been it, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause he's the king.
Right.
He like, banish you to the dungeon, you
Yeah.
evil servant. And I don't know if that's what they talked like. I think they were Middle Eastern, so they probably sounded a little different than
I don't think
English.
they had British accents.
Yeah, they probably not. But King James did, and
Yeah,
he
that's
wrote
true.
the Bible, so
Yeah.
that's not true, by the way. Anyway, but I think I'm making a point, maybe. But
Yeah.
So, having that ability to humble yourself, to see, the Bible said that David was a man after God's own heart. And so us being able to do that, like David humbled himself to see the error of his ways, so that he could seek God's heart over his own. My phone keeps ringing. And and so that's the way to be able to simplify it, to have that daily deal where you're surrendered and your goals for the next year. Like, I think it's possible that we might be making goals that may not be God's goals.
Right.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you can look at it in ministry, like, you know, for missions wise, like there's a gajillion missions opportunities out there. And so how do I pick what God wants the gathering to be a part of missions wise?
Right.
And I think it's unfair to be arrogant to think that I'm going to figure that out myself. You know,
Right.
like I've got to be able to ask God that.
Right.
And I've got to be able to have that relationship with God to where I can ask him and then be able to recognize, you know, what that answer is.
And a lot of times, in my experience, God uses other people to affirm
Exactly.
those things.
Yeah.
So being able to have people around you that you trust, that are honest, that care more about you than what you think about them, to speak into those things are going to be those confirmations and affirmations that those are the, you know, avenues you need to go down.
Well, people that desire you to follow God over your own selfish ambitions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because it's funny how people, and I guess I'm guilty of it too, you have an idea of something you want to do and you ask somebody their advice and they're like, that's not a good idea, but you just keep asking somebody until you find somebody that agrees with you.
Right.
And then you're like,
Yeah.
all right, man.
I
Well,
knew it was a
it would
great
be
I
like-
knew
idea.
it was a great idea. I knew somebody would
It
agree.
would be like me saying, you know, well, Jordan, for missions, I want to have a charity golf tournament and go on these golf missions to evangelize the people.
Hey, man, John Daly needs Jesus too.
And not saying that's a bad thing,
That'd be-
but I know in my heart, my motive for doing it would be because I love to play golf, not
Yeah.
because and I'm going to add God onto it to make it sound better.
Right.
You make me feel bad about going on surf missions trips now.
No, that, you know, like the other side of that would be like, you know,
Hey, keep it down over there.
if we go on a mission trip, if we go on a mission trip to Jupiter, Florida, because of a disaster relief or something, and if there happens to be a golf course there and we got time, I'm playing golf. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with having fun, but it's all like, if you don't have people around you that know you, then people ain't gonna be able to point out, like, Nick, what's your reason for wanting to do that?
Yeah.
Right.
Because it sounds a little funny.
You think Jesus and the disciples played like pickup games of I don't know what they played back
Basketball.
then. Cricket, maybe.
I think that's a British sport.
Well, they were, dude. Hadn't you read the Bible, man? They were clearly English.
He's joking on that one too.
But
Man.
I don't know. That was the only sport that I could think of that would be pretty primitive. You know, cricket seems like a fairly primitive. We forgot to introduce our fourth podcaster.
This is my daughter, Nora. She tends to be vocal.
But yeah, I don't know. I imagine that they tried to enjoy themselves as well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what? But anyway, that's besides the point.
So the question that I've had in my mind the whole time y'all have been talking is just, it sounds cheesy. It really does. But I really think if you were to go through life truly asking yourself, you know, to sum it up, all of it in 4 letters, the WWJD, I mean, really, I think we'd actually all be a little bit better off.
Yeah, it's a good life motto, really.
It is.
If you ask that question to yourself every single time you made a decision, it'd simplify things,
Right.
and you wouldn't have to make resolutions about things, because it'd be like, what would Jesus do? And he would do this, and be like, oh, okay,
Right.
I'm going to do that.
Right. So, and the reason I bring that up too is because we actually had a question on one of the Gathering in the Word video episodes this past week, because Bobby mentioned in Revelation 4:11, but in his commentary on it, he he said, even worshiping God with our eating. But that was one of the questions, was like, how do you worship God with your eating? How would Jesus either choose to eat? Would he do it by himself? Would he be in a group? What would he eat? Would he eat something that is bad for him, good for him? Whatever decisions you make, right? But like, what would Jesus actually do, and how do you worship God with your eating?
Yeah.
Well,
asking yourself,
you saying that just like to know what Jesus would do, you
got to know Jesus,
right? And the best way to know Jesus is he give you a big old book to look at to know him.
Yeah.
So
spend time in prayer.
Yep.
Yeah. So in thinking about resolutions, and I know it's always a first of the year topic, and we're not going to this probably ain't going to be the first podcast you hear about resolutions in the new year. But the main point for me was just like the Psalm says, I heard the Psalm on the radio and it kind of led from there, and I just happened to turn on the radio, but like, what does God really want? In thinking, like, let's say you can get on board with, like, probably without talking to God first and making a list of stuff I know I need to do or don't need to do. Like David, if you notice in the story of David and Bathsheba, like, even when he committed the sin, it didn't say he went to God. Right after, he's trying to fix it himself and
trying to cover it up.
Like, how do I right this wrong that I've done? And then he tries and it doesn't work, and it's like, well, I've already told this lie and done this thing. I might as well do another one.
But he didn't even want to write it. Like, it wasn't like he was trying to replace good for bad. He was like, I got to cover this thing up. Like, we gotta sweep this under the rug real quick.
Well, it went from, I'll just lie and call Uriah home. And then it was like, well, I've already lied now, so I might as well get him drunk and try to make him lie. Well, that don't work. Well, only thing I got left to do now is just kill the feller, because he won't do what I want him to do. So
yeah.
But it just showed me, like, a lot of times when we get in sin, or when we get in trouble, or when we're going through some sort of struggle, trial, suffering, we immediately think, what can I do to fix this, instead of, let me go to God.
Yeah, see what God wants me to do.
Right.
And so David finally, thankfully, after, I hope everybody's got a friend like Nathan that is in relationship with God, and that knows enough about you to come and tell you, hey, this is what you need to do, and help you realize your sin. And so then David finally comes to the conclusion and writes this really cool psalm where he's pouring his heart out, and he realizes, in verses 16 and 17, God, you don't want a sacrifice, or I'd offer one. You don't want burnt offerings. What you really want, to sum it up, is a broken, repentant heart. And that is the best place to start in the new year, not with a list of things that you think is going to make you better. So not saying, don't hear me say, a gym membership's a bad thing, or quitting smoking's a bad thing, or going on a diet's a bad thing. All that, it's just, what is the motivation of your heart, and have you even asked?
Right.
Yeah, I think the end point of what I feel like God was wanting me to convey was that if you make God your priority, then those things will automatically become your priority. Like, God will convict you of, all these things that he wants you to change or better about yourself, because that's the person that he's trying to transform you into. Whether that be eating healthier, or going to the gym, or, quitting cigarettes, or, whatever.
Right.
Amen.
They don't always have to be bad things. They can be, like, it doesn't always have to be quitting a bad thing. It can be doing a good thing, or,
right.
Whatever.
I was talking with Kyle right before we started this, and I started listening to a podcast that speaks on a similar thing, but the title of the podcast is 17 Ways to Stop Being a Crappy Man. And the podcast is
What was number one?
Undaunted Life, and it's a man's podcast, but it's really beneficial to listen to if you're a man. Number one.
What was number one?
How to quit being a crappy man.
Yeah.
I remember one that I thought was interesting is quit pretending you know things. Like, take the opportunity to be dumb.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah, like
That's
if
like my. I do that really well.
Like, take the opportunity to
say I don't
learn something. You
'cause
don't know something.
it blesses somebody else that does have those skills to pass them on, and it also humbles you and helps you not only learn a skill but realize, like, I'm not. It pushes your pride down.
Yeah.
I don't remember all of them. But if you go check it out, 17 Ways to Stop Being a Crappy Man in 2024. The name of the podcast is Undaunted Life. But some really beneficial things in there, and he speaks on kind of part of the same thing we've spoken on here today.
So is it a Christian podcast?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So one of them wasn't like buy a total gym and.
Nah.
No, well, I know one of them was do
Know how
hard-
to fight.
do hard things.
You know how to fight was one of them?
Yeah.
Like fist fight?
Yeah.
As a man.
Instead of scratching at your eyeballs like a woman?
No.
But his thing was that's like a
That's not fair because
self-protection
I've
thing.
watched women's MMA and they could.
Oh yeah.
Be prepared was
Honey.
kind of the avenue
be
he was
prepared.
going down. Not like be prepared on how to defend yourself and de-escalate a situation, and not just try to be Chuck Norris, but
Anyway, I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole.
yeah, I think we've wrapped this one up. Let's tie a bow on it and send her off.
Alrighty.
Yeah. All right.
If you got questions-
So if you can make one resolution, what would that resolution be?
WWJD.
Yeah.
One resolution, I think.
Like one resolution that would cover all resolutions. Yeah.
Well, you say you said that at the beginning, just making God your desire instead of trying to figure out what all your desires are. For me, I would just say, like, having a Nathan in my life, having that person in my life, because one of the first things once David recognized his sin, I noticed he didn't recognize it on his own. He had to have somebody tell him.
Right.
And everybody's in the same boat. Like I can sit here and say, yeah, I know I need to have a broken, repentant heart toward God, but a lot of times it's hard to submit your pride and your sinful, selfish nature to
Like
being
what details of that are you not submitting to?
right. So having somebody to help you recognize, I think, is a place for me to start anyway.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah. It's good. Alrighty.
Nora says it's time.
It is. I need to end this and go change a diaper.
All right, guys. Well,
Walking Together podcast,
yeah.
changing diapers.
We're walking together, guys.
But I'm not
Welcome
going to
back.
change it. So
This
you
is
gotta-
life.
You got to do
This
that
is
one on
life.
your own, bud.
welcome back. We're glad to be back. Yeah, and like I said, if you got any questions, comments, want to tell us your resolutions, want to tell us the difference between the two, drop it in the comments. GatheringSurfCity.com/WTP. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, the main podcast sources. But
you can come over to the gathering and hang out.
Yeah, that too. We're in Surf City. Look us up. Big blue metal roof. Yeah, somebody's here most of the time. Y'all have a good week, and we'll see you later.
You.